She sat in the back seat with her costume still folded across her lap. Her hands didn't move. Her lips barely parted when she whispered, "She said I wasn't pretty enough to be the princess." I gripped the steering wheel tighter than I meant to. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. That morning, she'd walked into school glowing with hope. That afternoon, she walked out like someone had switched off the lights inside her. Her name is Lena. She's 10 years old. She's my daughter, my whole world. And she had just been told by a teacher that she didn't look the part to play the princess in the school play. She didn't cry right away. That's what hit me the hardest. She waited until we pulled out of the parking lot like she didn't want to break in front of anyone. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw her wiping away quiet tears with the sleeve of her hoodie. I wanted to turn the car around, march into that school, demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. Because what happened next, on the night of the play, was something I'll never forget. And neither will the people who were in that auditorium. Lena was the kind of kid who turned everything into a performance. If we were walking down the grocery aisle and a song played over the speakers, she'd spin the shopping cart like it was a ballroom dance partner. If we passed a reflective window, she'd pause and curtsy to her own reflection, not out of vanity, out of joy. She wore paper crowns and ballet slippers to breakfast. She narrated her own life in a British accent. When I'd ask her to clean her room, she'd shout, "A noble quest awaits," and start picking up her socks like she was saving enchanted scrolls. I'd laugh, but I'd also feel this quiet ache, because I knew, deep down, that kids like Lena, bright, quirky, unfiltered, don't always get to hold on to that magic. The world tends to rub the sparkle out of them when no one's watching. She was 10, still little, but catching glimpses of how things worked. She had started noticing the way other girls got picked first for games, the way teachers smiled differently at kids who wore the right shoes. She didn't say much about it, but I could tell. Those observations were starting to settle somewhere deep in her. That's why the school play meant so much to her. It was called The Royal Garden, some original production the school's drama teacher, Ms. Harwood, had written herself. It was cheesy, full of songs about flowers and kindness, and finding your royal truth. Lena had been talking about it nonstop for weeks. "This is it, Mom," she said one night over spaghetti. "My first real role. I know I'll get it. I can feel it." She practiced in her room every night. She'd set up stuffed animals as her audience and bow after every line. I peeked through the door once and saw her standing on her toy chest, arms raised like she was addressing a kingdom. She was glowing. I helped her make a costume from old Halloween dresses and a curtain sash. We stayed up late one night gluing rhinestones to a cardboard tiara. She kept saying, "They'll see me and just know I'm the princess." I didn't tell her not to get her hopes up. I didn't give her the usual, "You might not get it, but that's okay," talk. Not because I thought she'd definitely win the part, but because I didn't want to plant doubt where there was only light. Lena didn't come from a perfect family. Her dad left when she was 5. I worked 2 jobs, and most of her clothes are hand-me-downs from friends at church. She knew that, but she never let it define her. She always walked into a room like she belonged there. And when the audition day came, she marched into school holding her script like it was a royal decree. I watched her through the windshield, her purple costume peeking out from under her jacket, her cardboard tiara tucked in her backpack. She waved, did a little curtsy for the crossing guard, and disappeared through the school doors. That morning, I sat in my car for a few extra minutes, just thinking about how proud I was of her. Not for auditioning, but for believing so hard in herself. And that's what made what happened later so much harder, because she didn't walk out of that school skipping. She didn't say a word. She just opened the car door, climbed into the back seat, and stared straight ahead. And then she said it. She said I wasn't pretty enough to be the princess. I looked at her in the mirror. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't even sad. It was empty, like someone had drained the music from her. And I just sat there, gripping the wheel, silent. I'd always thought I'd know what to do in that kind of moment. Stand up, say the right thing, fight. But all I could do was sit there and watch her hold her costume like it didn't belong to her anymore. That was the moment everything changed. Because it wasn't just about a school play. It was about what kind of world my daughter was being told she belonged in. And I decided that if the world wasn't going to make room for her kind of princess, I would. The day after the audition, Lena didn't mention the cast list. She didn't bring it up at breakfast, didn't ask to check the school website, didn't even look excited to leave the house. I knew she was trying not to hope too hard in case she was let down again, but I still packed her the good lunch, cut the sandwich into stars, tucked a little note inside. No matter what, you shine. I wasn't sure if that would help or make it worse. When I picked her up that afternoon, she walked to the car slowly. Her backpack dragged on one shoulder and her eyes were focused on the ground. I knew, just by the way she moved, that she hadn't gotten the part, but I didn't expect the reason to hurt so much. She said I can be a tree, Lena said once she was buckled in. Like, not even a flower, just a tree. I asked her what the teacher said when she asked why. She told me I wasn't princess material, that I didn't fit the vision. Fit the vision. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember what song was on the radio or what time it was. I only remember her voice, soft but stunned, like someone waking up from a dream that ended too soon. When we got home, she didn't run to her room or cry on the stairs. She just sat on the couch with her costume on her lap, pulled off the tiara and set it gently on the coffee table like it was fragile. Then she went upstairs without another word. Stared at that costume. The rhinestones we glued. The uneven hem she insisted was vintage royal. I kept seeing her standing on her toy chest, delivering lines to stuffed animals, believing, completely, that she could be the star. And now someone had told her with all the authority of a grown adult that she didn't look the part. Not that she wasn't ready, not that someone else had more experience, but that she didn't look like a princess. I've heard those words before. I've felt the weight of them. Not tall enough, not polished enough, not what they expected. But I never thought my daughter would hear them before she even hit middle school. I wanted to storm into the school and demand to speak with Miss Harwood, but what would I say? How dare you cast my child as a tree? It would sound petty, emotional, and worse, it might make things harder for Lena. So I didn't go to the school. I didn't send an email. I didn't call the principal. Instead, I watched Lena retreat. She stopped watching her favorite princess movies. She folded up her dress-up clothes and packed them in a storage box without saying anything. She went quiet during dinner. And one night, as I was putting dishes away, I heard her talking to herself in her room. "She's not what we imagined," she said, imitating the teacher's voice. "She's not royal." Then silence. She wasn't acting. She was repeating the words like they'd become truth. That's when I knew I had to do something. Not to fix the play, not to punish the teacher, but to remind Lena that her worth wasn't measured by someone else's casting call. She was already the lead character in her own story. She just needed a moment to remember. That night, after she went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and started writing. I didn't know exactly what I was creating, just that I needed to put something into the world that told the truth about what a real princess looks like, what she sounds like, what she is. It came out in one stream. No edits, no overthinking. It was a monologue, written for Lena. Not to change the play, not to change the teacher, to change her. Because if she couldn't be the lead in their version of the story, I would give her a stage of her own. I stayed up that night until the kitchen clock blinked past 2 in the morning. I didn't plan to write anything. I just couldn't sleep knowing my daughter had packed her dreams into a cardboard box and pushed them under her bed like they didn't matter. The words came fast, not perfect but raw. A monologue written like a letter to the version of Lena who still believed in magic. It wasn't filled with flowery phrases or fairy tale fluff. It was honest, strong, bold. It was what I wished someone had said to me when I was 10 years old and shrinking under someone else's version of enough. "A princess is not chosen because of her looks," I wrote. "She becomes one because of her courage, because she stands tall even when others try to shrink her." When I was done, I printed it out and folded the paper carefully. I didn't know when I'd give it to her, or if I even would, but I kept it close. Days leading up to the play felt heavy. Lena didn't talk about rehearsal. She went, did her part as tree number 3, and came home. No excitement, no frustration, just quiet compliance. One afternoon, I asked if she wanted help getting ready for the show. She nodded, but didn't meet my eyes. We ironed her costume together at the kitchen table. I asked if she wanted sparkles on her sleeves, like we'd planned before auditions. She shrugged and said, "Trees don't sparkle, Mom." She said it like it was a fact, like someone had convinced her there was a permanent wall between where she stood and where the princesses danced. That night, after she went to bed, I opened the printed monologue again. I read it aloud to an empty living room. My voice cracked halfway through. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about giving Lena one moment to feel seen, to feel powerful, to feel like she belonged in the spotlight she had imagined herself in since she was 4 years old and twirling in a pillowcase cape. I didn't know how the play would end. I didn't know if anyone would let her speak, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let her story close with a costume in her lap and tears in her eyes. The night of the play arrived. The auditorium was buzzing, parents holding bouquets, siblings with glitter signs. I watched Lena backstage in her tree costume, stiff and still. She glanced at the girls in pastel gowns, the ones cast as princesses. She didn't look angry, just invisible. I found a seat in the middle row. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my fingers. The folded monologue was in my purse. I hadn't told Lena about it. I didn't want to make promises I couldn't keep. The lights dimmed. The curtain rose. The show was fine. Kids remembered most of their lines. The music played. The audience clapped in polite waves. Lena stood near the back of the stage, arms posed like branches, eyes scanning the crowd. She didn't smile once. The final scene came and went. The actors bowed. The lights began to fade, and I stood up. I didn't plan the moment. I didn't ask for permission. I just stood. "Excuse me," I said, voice clear, cutting through the settling applause. "Before we all leave, I'd like to invite someone to the stage who hasn't had her moment yet." A hush fell over the room. A few heads turned. The principal shifted in his chair. Miss Harwood stood frozen by the curtain. I took the monologue from my purse and held it in both hands. "Lena Wynne," I said, "please come here." She looked terrified, confused, but something in my voice must have reached her. She stepped forward, hesitantly, then walked across the stage toward me. I didn't tell her what it was. I just handed her the paper and whispered, "This is yours." She looked down at the page, then up at me, and slowly, she turned to face the audience. Her hands trembled. Her voice shook at first, but she began to read. Lena stood at the center of the stage, clutching the paper in both hands. Her fingers gripped the edges like it might float away if she loosened her grip. The audience was silent, not confused, not hostile, just still. Everyone seemed to understand in some unspoken way that something real was about to happen. She looked down at the page. Her lips moved for a second before any sound came out. Then she spoke. "A princess doesn't wait for someone to crown her." The words came out small but clear. She paused, took a breath, and continued. "She doesn't have to wear perfect shoes or have the softest voice. A real princess speaks when others tell her to be quiet. She stands tall when others say she's too different." A ripple moved through the room. A few heads tilted. A few parents leaned forward in their seats. I could see the moment she felt it. That shift, that click. Her voice began to rise. "She is brave. She is kind. She gets looked over, laughed at, called names, but she still shows up. She still believes she's worth more than the costume they give her." Her hands stopped shaking. She does not shrink to fit a part. The part grows to fit her. And that's when the first person stood. It was a woman in the third row clutching a program. She didn't cheer or whistle. She just stood. Her expression said everything: recognition, pride, maybe even a little bit of regret. Then a man in the back stood up, then a teenager with braces, then another parent, then a teacher. And one by one, the audience rose. Not because it was polite, not because they were told to, because they saw something they hadn't expected to see. Lena didn't flinch. She kept going, stronger now. "I am not the girl who fits your picture. I am the one who redraws it." That was the final line. She looked out at the sea of standing strangers, took a tiny step back, and bowed. The applause didn't start slow. It was immediate, like the room had been holding its breath the whole play and could finally exhale. I could barely see through my tears. She turned to me and smiled, not wide, not showy, just soft. Content, powerful, like someone who had just reclaimed something no one else could give her. Miss Harwood stood near the curtain, motionless. Her face was hard to read, Surprise, discomfort, maybe reflection. She didn't interrupt. She didn't scold. She just watched. And I think, in some part of her mind, she understood. Lena didn't need a scripted role. She had written her own. After the play, people approached her in the hallway. Strangers, parents. A young girl in a sunflower costume ran up and said, "You were my favorite part." Lena knelt down to thank her. A man with a teacher's badge told me, "That was the most honest thing I've seen on this stage in 10 years. I didn't care about compliments. I only cared about what I saw in Lena." She was standing taller. She wasn't trying to disappear behind the crowd. She wasn't adjusting her sleeves or looking down at her shoes. She was proud, not because she'd proven someone wrong, but because she'd remembered who she was. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I walked into the living room and found her standing in front of the mirror, still in her tree costume. She'd pinned the cardboard tiara back onto her head. She met her own eyes in the mirror and said, "I liked being up there." Then she turned to me and asked, "Was it too much?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "It was exactly right." She curled up on the couch beside me, resting her head on my shoulder, and whispered, "I think I like being the kind of princess that writes her own story." And I smiled, because that's the kind of royalty the world really needs. The next morning, the cardboard tiara was still on the kitchen counter. It had a crease down the middle and a rhinestone missing near the edge. I thought about fixing it, maybe gluing it back together, but then I stopped. It was perfect as it was, worn, but still standing. Lena came down the stairs humming. That was new. She hadn't hummed in weeks. She poured cereal, sat down, and acted like nothing extraordinary had happened the night before. But something had. I saw it in the way she carried herself, lighter, freer. Like she'd remembered a part of herself that had almost gone quiet. I asked if she wanted to talk about the play. She shook her head, spoon halfway to her mouth. "Not really," she said. "I just liked the feeling. You know, being heard." She didn't need to talk about it. She'd already said everything that mattered. On that stage, in her voice, in front of people who didn't expect anything from her except silence. Later that week, I got an email from the school. Ms. Harwood wanted to meet. I went, not knowing what to expect. Part of me braced for a reprimand. Another part hoped for an apology. Instead, she offered a single sentence. "I misjudged her," she said, "and I misjudged what the audience was ready for." It wasn't a full apology, but it was honest. And in a world where most people dig in deeper when they're wrong, I respected that she at least acknowledged it. I didn't fight. I didn't push. I simply said, "She didn't need your play to be seen. She just needed the mic." Ms. Harwood nodded slowly. "She's got something most adults don't." I left it at that. Lena didn't want to audition for the spring musical. Not because she was afraid, she just wasn't interested in being someone else's idea of a lead. She started writing instead. Little stories, dramatic monologues, poems that turned into characters. One night, she brought me a stack of papers and said, "These are for kids like me. You know, the ones who don't get picked first." She wasn't bitter. She was building. A month after the play, she was invited to read her monologue again at a local youth writing night. This time, she wore the same tree costume by choice. But she added gold ribbon around the sleeves and wore the tiara like it was made of diamonds. She stood on a much smaller stage, in a room that smelled like coffee and folding chairs, but her voice was louder than ever. After her reading, a girl with a scar on her face came up and hugged her without saying a word. Lena smiled and said, "I hope you write your own next." In that moment, I understood exactly what had changed. This wasn't just about one play or one cruel comment. It was about how a single moment can either shape a child or shatter them, and how sometimes, when the people in charge don't make space for them, we as parents have to break the walls ourselves. Lena taught me that, not through defiance, through grace. She didn't scream. She didn't throw a fit. She stood in front of a room full of strangers and spoke her truth with a shaking voice that grew stronger by the word. That night in the auditorium, she didn't just reclaim her voice. She gave one to others who had been quietly fading into the background. She reminded every person in that room what it looks like when a child is brave enough to show up exactly as they are and demand to be seen. And me? I learned that sometimes Being a good parent isn't about fixing everything. It's about listening. It's about waiting for the right moment, and when it comes, handing them the mic and stepping back. Lena's not a princess in the traditional sense. She's not delicate or polished. She's fire and roots and wild imagination. She's the kind of royalty that doesn't wait to be chosen. She chooses herself. And that, I now believe, is what being a princess truly means. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, if it made you think of someone who's ever been told they weren't enough, share it with them. Remind them their voice matters. And if you've ever felt like Lena, overlooked, underestimated, told to stay in the background, I hope this reminded you that your story isn't over. You can still take the stage. You can still speak your truth. If you found something meaningful here, please like the video. Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more true stories that speak from the heart. Thanks for being here. Keep showing up, keep standing tall, and never let anyone tell you who you're allowed to be.